Can you tell me where?
Fala pessoal, sou Kelvin Araújo, estou aqui em mais um vídeo do nosso canal. Antes de eu falar do que se trata o vídeo de hoje, eu peço para que vocês adotem o procedimento padrão de sempre. Abriu, deixou o like, ativem o sininho para as notificações. Não esqueçam de nos seguir nas nossas outras redes sociais, Facebook, Progland, Instagram, Prog_Land. Se você produz música, conhece alguém que produz música, por favor envie o seu material no Groover, conta Progland. Por favor, nos siga no nosso site, proglandmusica.wordpress.com, para acompanhar outros conteúdos extras que vocês não vão ver aqui no nosso canal. Introdutório feito, eu vim falar um pouco sobre o vídeo de hoje, um vídeo de entrevistas abrindo a nossa temporada de 2026 de entrevistas internacionais, com uma lenda, um músico lendário da história da música progressiva, da cena de Canterbury, Richard Sinclair, falando com exclusividade aqui no nosso canal, num papo extraordinário sobre os seus quase 60 anos, mais de 60 anos de carreira, suas passagens em diversas bandas. Ele foi integrante do Wilde Flowers, que foi a banda, entre aspas, geradora de grande celeiro de músicos da cena de Canterbury. Depois foi integrante do Caravan, integrante do Hatfield and The North, do Camel, fez uma série de discos colaborativos, foi parça de muita gente, do Robert Wyatt, de outros músicos, os caras do Gilgamesh, National Health, etc. Outros discos também colaborativos que ele fez. E nessa entrevista ele passeia, né, por toda essa trajetória e etc. O Richard está com uma nova conta na plataforma Bandcamp, onde ele também faz uma espécie de antologia, mostrando coisas raras, arquivos, itens autografados raros dele, que também estão à venda lá, e coisas inéditas que ele gravou e que anteriormente estavam disponíveis em pouca tiragem, ou até mesmo coisas inéditas mesmo, do zero, né, como novas versões e novas músicas, né. Eu vou deixar o link aqui para o Bandcamp dele aqui no nosso comentário. E essa é a primeira de duas partes da entrevista. A entrevista rendeu demais, o Richard falou e etc, de tudo, foi traçando histórias, né? A entrevista foi mais ou menos uma coisa meio storytelling mesmo, né? Embora ele tenha falado muitas coisas também sobre Caravan, que é o assunto principal dessa primeira parte. Segunda parte ele foca mais no Hatfield and The North, e na passagem dele no Camel também, e outros discos colaborativos, como Before a World Is Sad, né, que é um disco dele que eu adoro. E é isso, eu espero que vocês curtam a entrevista, digam aí nos comentários o que vocês acham e etc. Fiquem atentos aqui no nosso canal, porque agora vai vir uma série de papos internacionais agora, no início de março, para abrir a porteira também. Depois vão vir entrevistas nacionais também. E é isso, espero que vocês gostem. Fiquem com a entrevista. Fala pessoal, estamos aqui em mais uma entrevista no nosso canal, mais uma entrevista internacional, abrindo a temporada de 2026 aqui no nosso canal, com um gigante da cena de Canterbury, um gigante da história da música progressiva. Richard Sinclair here, thanks for finally... we got it. Finally, we got it, Richard.
Well,
Thanks so much, dear friend.
hello, everybody from southern Italy, and I'm looking forward to coming to Brazil and learning Portuguese because I love the sound of it.
Because he's willing to come up to Brazil, and finally, I'm fingers crossed. Let's cross our fingers that 2026 we will see Richard Sinclair here in Brazil, doing some concerts, and
thanks, Kelvin.
And I have to thank you for your goodwilling, for your acceptance, and for being a great dear friend throughout these years that we are chatting through WhatsApp and all of this stuff, and it's been marvelous. It's really marvelous to having the chance of knowing you, to having the chance of chatting with you, and to have the chance of listening to you singing, because you had sent me an audio 2 days or 3 days ago, and
It was marvelous. I wasn't expecting that, and I was mesmerized because your voice hasn't aged one single fucking day since the
Oh, no
60s.
swearing. I'm excited as you, but it's sort of like, oh goodness, I've just seen, look, hey, look at this stuff. I live in a Truly, okay? And this is my original copy of this. But check it out.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
what's climbed into it. Look at that. It's dead,
That's
right?
really cool.
That's a
Yeah.
scorpion. Look at that. Wow. I was going to show you this because I'm trying to get money for Nicholas Sinclair, David Sinclair's youngest son, okay? And
Okay.
this is my original copy that I gave to my mum. Of course, I didn't sign it like that, okay? I sign it like this because I always look like a choir boy, so I try to be saintly about it, okay? It looks back to front on this. I hope it doesn't look back to, I suppose it does, doesn't it, if you pointed at the... Does my signature look back to front?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
well,
gonna chat.
pie should be on that side, This is the original Caravan thing. So, yeah, I'm going to get it up for sale because he's been working on my archive series, okay?
To start our interview, highlighting your recent Bandcamp platform. You are releasing now some archives on there. It's quite important now, this movement from you and from other artists to starting releasing stuff on that platform because
Well,
it's
it's
a
never,
direct
yeah, okay, yeah.
revenue for the artists, and this is quite important because
Okay,
when
let me just step in here because you're talking away, and I think I should let you know all the information about that because how I think about it. Yes, it's a good idea, and it does bring the money to the artists that made that music, whereas the record company used to take it all, and you were lucky to get anything. Now in this day and age, you make your own record companies, and it's so easy for the people to do. And all the new artists and things like that, because whatever you do, if it's liked a lot on all the sites you put up, they're the people that support you. Okay, so if you get a million people wanting to hear your music, there is your market. It didn't used to be like that in the early days, and it's like, I mean, my history starts back in, as far as what I'm known for is being starting the Canterbury scene with Hugh Hopper and Brian Hopper and Robert Wyatt and Kevin Ayres, okay?
yeah,
And that came from Wilde Flowers, and then it moved into
yeah,
Submachine and Caravan, okay? And then everybody I play with tends to get sort of known for being in the Canterbury scene. In fact, they're not. They're just a bunch of tourists that come to Canterbury.
yeah. Yeah.
No, they're all my friends, many of them, and Submachine still exists now. I mean, so many of my friends from that period of time are no longer with us, sadly, on the planet. This
Yeah.
year.
And as I was saying, that's real important to have the artists move to Bandcamp, to these platforms with direct revenue coming to the
For
artist
me,
because
yeah, yes, it's a good idea because I'm completely skinned from all the things I did all the way through.
you don't need to rely anymore on the record companies to pledge
Yeah, but it
or
does obviously help to have the money. Obviously, we've got some monies, but not very much.
yeah,
And when I started my own record company called Richard Sinclair Songs in 1992, when I made my first album outside of record companies stuff. Well, it wasn't actually; it was with HTD Records, and that's quite a story in itself. And until I got the rights of it, once all these record companies have defaulted, when they do it, I started to write contracts then. So the contract for I made an album in '92 called Caravan of Dreams, which has sold many, but the trouble is now I've got control of it, and it's mine
yeah,
because all the record companies that took it on, small ones and old, the original ones, they all defaulted. They all defaulted to it, and sold the rights to it to someone else. It's like, wow.
yeah.
and you don't get royalties that way, right? So
Yeah.
now I own it. I can bring it out. I'm probably going to bring out those 2 albums. So called. I think I've got one about here. Hang on, it looks like this. Look, Richard Sinclair's Caravan of Dreams.
Yeah.
Okay. RSVP. That's the second one that came out in '93, and at that time in '92. I made my own bands from 1990. In fact, what happened in 1990, my cousin was asked by Central TV in Nottingham. They were doing 26 shows in a program called 26 Bands,
Yeah.
26 shows. And it was called Bedrock Series because it came out in 2 in the morning, okay? And Dave Sinclair was asked to reform the original Caravan. So we did that. Obviously, he came to me straight away because Pi wasn't playing music. Then he'd taken a break from it because they finding it difficult to sort of like, you know, find concerts and things. We just had it. He was exhausted of it, you know. I left in when was it? 1990, beginning of 92.
1992. Yeah.
Yeah. And 72, in fact, 1972. And I moved on to form a band called Hatfield and The North with Dave Sinclair, my cousin, left when we'd finished Land of Grey and Pink, so he didn't really want to do the tour that went with that, okay? And so I managed to get, I was going to London quite a lot then and meeting the Miller brothers, Steve Miller and Phil Miller. And eventually we moved up. I left Caravan and moved up to London because Pip Pyle, then who'd been in Gong, wanted to form a band with me in it and with his lifelong friend Phil Miller, the guitarist, and Steve Miller. They'd all the 3 of them had played in a band called Delivery, which was really Steve Miller's Delivery, but it was then called Carol Grimes' Delivery because they got her in as a singer. Okay, I'd never heard any of that then when I moved to London, and the album we made after Land of Grey and Pink, we needed a keyboard player, and I've been going to London and playing with Steve Miller and Phil Miller, and I've met Pip and things like that. And obviously, I'd known him from the past anyway because he's all part of what is now. He was all part of what was then known as the Canterbury scene because of David Allen. Started Soft Machine early days, you know. So it's like a long story, but anyway, back to the plot. This Bandcamp site now is very good for me. It's organised from my friend Robert Kelborg, who goes under the name of Kirsten Kelborg on Facebook, okay? Because one of his sisters died and he uses that. But he's a very good person at putting. I would never know how to put up any of all my archive series. I have thousands of tapes of that. And some of them date back to when I started to play with Hugh and Brian Hopper before even Wilde Flowers formed, okay? And that's quite interesting because on the back of one of the tapes I've got, which is Windows 1.75, is Robert at the piano in the Hugh Hopper home, Brian Hopper's home, you know, the Hopper home. With him at the piano and a cymbal and, you know, with a stick and things, he's obviously looking towards the microphone and he's saying, and playing piano, and he's saying, we don't sing songs.
Yeah.
Okay? And in the background, there's Mrs. Hopper washing up and the budgie, okay? Which would be quite interesting to put on Bandcamp, wouldn't it? And so my Canterbury scene had already started. It goes back to 1800 when the Sinclairs were in Canterbury and my great-great-grandfather was a hussar, you know, that fought in the Crimea War, and he was always on a horse. And his son, which we know as Richard I in Canterbury, was a very famous portrait photographer and artist, and he used to paint. You know, he had a photography scene. You'll find it on WhatsApp. Sorry,
Mhm.
WhatsApp, and no, you won't. You find it on oh God, what's it called? The main site, YouTube, isn't it? It's on
Yeah.
YouTube, and it's Richard Sinclair and Sons, Northgate, Canterbury photographers. In fact, it's Richard Sinclair and Sons, and the son is my grandfather, who's also, he was an entertainer, a singer in Canterbury. He was one of the, what they call the Pearly King, when they used to have a Costa, you know. So he was a singer with my grandmum, and they were the Pearly Queen. They used to have these things. They used to entertain vaudeville music on a Sunday in Canterbury, so no one ever talked about it, okay? Because it's, you know, Canterbury is the head of the Church of England, you know, the Christian religion, which
Yeah.
language went round as the British Empire. You know, it sounds a bit like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's quite funny. In fact, it's a line of Richards, okay, that did music
Yeah.
in Canterbury. My dad was was known as the most, you know, was the number one singer in Canterbury.
Yeah.
He had a quintet in the war and all that. And so this is where it all comes from. And so there's photographs of that, which will be on Bandcamp. So don't worry, I haven't moved away from Bandcamp yet, Cole. You know,
Yeah.
so it's quite an interesting story, the Sinclair Canterbury story. It comes before what you know about, which is the media, where everything's written about by people that weren't musicians in it. Okay.
Yeah. Check it out, please. Everyone, check it out as soon as possible. Richard's Bandcamp is
Thank
really
you.
worthwhile.
It's
Really,
Richard
really.
Sinclair. It's richardsinclair.bandcamp. No, Richard Sinclair
Yeah.
songs.bandcamp.com. And you can listen to it all for free just going
We'll
up
put
there.
the link here in bio.
Please join my Richard Sinclair Song Club, which is on the Bandcamp thing, because with those funds, it means that, you know, if 1,000 people do it at $50, that's $50,000. It means, I was just saying this to you, to Colin, I can come directly and play in your garden and pay for the flight itself, because I do solo concerts everywhere, not just at big concerts. I like to meet people and go and play in their homes and things, and they organise a little concert for me to go and play. So I'm hoping to come to Brazil to do a couple of festival concerts where I play with the musicians that are there. And I know many now because of other friends that have come there to Brazil. I've even been on albums with them here in Italy, because a friend of mine called Marco Jimmy, who makes his ambient music and things like that, comes and uses some of these musicians in Brazil, and he comes to Brazil, I think, every year to play concerts and things. So I've sung for him and all that. So I've got to meet quite a lot of, you know, musicians. Not personally, I've always loved Brazilian rhythms. And now I know what it is about after speaking to someone else, a guitarist I know a couple of guitarists there now, well, a few. I'm blessed for that, for the people I play with, like Caravan and Camel and Hatfield and The North particularly, and my own bands and things. And traveling as a solo artist works well for me because people love to play my music.
It's creating a brotherhood, creating a giant brotherhood. And
Yeah,
talking about brotherhood,
yeah.
I would like to go back in time, way back in time to the early 60s, about your early period when you were playing with your father's dance band. And I would like to ask a
Well, I didn't
trivia
play. No,
question
listen, I
about
was
that
a bit
period.
young. My father's dance band was in the 30s. I only used to go and see him when I was 4. He bought. He was always. I mean, the whole house was singing with music and things. Even when you talk, you know, it's like it's music with them. And my mum and dad they never used to discuss anything. It was perfect, and there wasn't any arguments. There was nothing. My mum used to sing. She played piano in the early days. This is like in the 30s. I mean, they got married, in the 30s, sort of, and there's photographs of all that. It all goes on Bandcamp. I've got to do the whole of my history. But yeah, you're saying, well, in the early days, I used to go and see my dad play the dinner dances, and that's why I was invited to go up to the Hopper home, because Brian Hopper and Hugh Hopper were making a band, and they heard from my when my dad was talking to the Hopper parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hopper. They used to go and see my dad at the dinner dances, and they were very, you go and eat and watch the band and things like that. It's called dinner dance music, okay? And my dad was singing like all the popular standard songs from England and things. I mean, he's a vocalist. And my favourite was obviously Nat King Cole. He used to sing the Nat King Cole tunes, but not. And he had a voice like Nat King Cole, but of course it was an English accent. And so I used to go with my mum and see him play in the hotels. They're all around East Kent, where Canterbury is like positioned. So they're all around that. And we used to go and see him play at the theatres and the hotels and things. He had the #1 band, and he played with other bands then too. So I got all my music then. I didn't actually play with him then, but of course he'd bought me a guitar when I was 14, and then again, and then when I was 15, and just about to go up to the because how it came about that I went to the Hopper home to start a band was he was talking about. He just bought a guitar. They were talking about their sons making a band. And Richard said, "Well, I've just bought a guitar. It's a Hofner Verithin with a Bigsby unit, and he bought me a piggyback AC30." Okay,
Yeah.
so and I was allowed to play it in the home, no problem at all. Loudly, sort of got on. I was learning to play guitar, so I've always been a guitarist all my life. Anyway. The Hopper parents went home and they said, "Hey, Richard's playing guitar and things like that." And of course they knew about their parents coming to see my dad. He got a great voice. He played double bass, drums, and other instruments like 4-string guitars, ukuleles. And so I got a call my dad got a call from Hugh Hopper and said, "Bring Richard up, please. We'd like to try him out." And so I went up there and of course got the gig, And it was a rather strange time because we were playing American music, which I never listened to American music. And of course, because they went to grammar school, they also knew about all the jazz. I'd never listened to American music and things like that. I'd obviously heard renditions of the bands that sounded like it. I listened to the Beatles, okay, which is very Liverpudlian English sounding, okay. And so my dad used to say about the Rolling Stones, he said, "Well, sounds like they're delivering the coal," okay? Which is funny really because, they were like, their influences were obviously American, American.
Do you remember your first performance during this period?
Well, what happened was, after about a year of playing with him, and it wasn't the Wilde Flowers then, it was just Hugh Hopper, Brian Hopper band.
Yeah.
First of all, Robert was invited, and people have said to Robert, "Hey, there's a guy who comes from Herne Bay with similar hair to yours, blonde, and acts a bit like you. That's Robert, and they all had long blonde hair. They looked like a bunch of beatniks. They weren't hippies, they were beatniks. And I was the one with the quiff, I look more like Billy J. Kramer and whatever it is, Boston and things like that. I was the odd one out because I was 15 years old and they were all 3 to 5 years older than me. And Robert being told by friends, "Hey, there's a guy that looks a bit like you," and that was Kevin Ayers, okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he was invited to join the band at the house, which was called Tanglewood, which was a Hugh Hopper home in Giles Lane. right on the borders of Canterbury. And appeared one day a little bit drunk at 45 degrees. Who was holding his hand and arm was Pi Hastings' sister, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that was his girlfriend then. And so the Hastings family were down in Canterbury because Jane had married one of the richest men in England called John Aspinall, who had a gambling club in Mayfair. And Jane was the waif, you know, the main model of Mayfair there, beautiful black hair and da da da. So Kevin had spotted the guy's name was Aspinall, John Aspinall, and he had a palace, okay, just outside Canterbury in Beachbourne, and one of the biggest zoos in Europe with elephants, gorillas, bears, you name it, tigers, lions.
Yeah.
It's very famous in Kent. And of course, Kevin had met Jane and became her boyfriend. And the story from Pi is quite funny. He said, well, Kevin first appeared in the zoo as the gorilla cage cleaner, cleaning the shit out the cages, which I think was a story from Pi, but you know, it's quite a funny one, really, isn't it? Anyway, that's when I got to meet Kevin first of all when he came to Tanglewood. Then that was the five-piece band, you know, Brian Hopper, Hugh Hopper, myself, Robert Wyatt, and Kevin Ayres. And our first gig was in a small seaside town 5 miles outside Canterbury on the coast called the Bear and Key. And we played our first set there. We've been rehearsing at a little place outside of Canterbury called Barham, in a cottage there, and someone had built one big amp for us, and Mrs. Hopper had made lovely silk shirts for us, different colours, and we did our first concert, and we played through one amplifier, the 3 instruments, okay, and Kevin sang through the PA system, which was a couple of columns and an amp, you know. But we all played 2 guitar. I played guitar, rhythm, and Brian played sax and guitar, lead. Hugh played bass, and we all went through one big cabinet through one amp. Okay, and there's recordings not of that, but we did some recordings. First recordings down at a place called Dumpton Gap, which was near the coast, in a famous guitarist. Yeah.
I think it was probably somewhat hard for you guys to put together a list of tracks to record.
Well, no, because
there's so much talent on there, you know. There's a plenty of great minds.
Yeah, but listen, we're all young people then, and Brian had written a couple of tunes. I think Kevin had written a couple of tunes. And Robert had written a couple of tunes, but we were mainly playing, when we started off, we played a Rolling Stones number, we played Chuck Berry, we played Mose Allison, you know, around past me, but I mean, I was a choir boy then. And so I think I sang a couple of Beatles tunes, and I sung one of Hugh's tunes called, I think it was called A Certain Kind. Certain kind. I mean, Robert sang it later as he had a more rock voice. I had a choir boy voice. And so I got asked by many people that heard those recordings, why ever did I sing like that? You know, well, I'm a choir boy. Okay. You know, I mean, I can sing rock and roll if you like, you know, whatever you want to do, you know. But I prefer to be sort of a bit more melodic, like Nat King Cole, like my dad, okay? And so, yeah, we had a nice time. It only lasted sort of 3/4 of a year for me because I'd had enough by then. I think Kevin just left before me. And I was going to college then to do an industrial design course. And so I wanted to concentrate on that. I didn't really like doing the Wilde Flowers music because I wasn't really into that type of thing, you know. It was fun to do, you know.
For me,
Uh,
yeah, I suppose
I
it.
mean, I had to play. It was really good, especially Robert's thing too, and his singing. I
One,
enjoyed that. I didn't really enjoy Kevin's singing then. I now. I mean, tomorrow I'm doing Kevin Ayres' song, a tribute album that my friend William Hayter's making, and I've done the bass parts. Well, it's 2 songs. I'm doing. I mean, I like Kevin's, but obviously a lot of people do, but it's not my favourite sort of style of thing, you know. I mean, I met Kevin quite a few times, but anyway, the song. Singing a song in the
one of
morning,
the things.
singing it. It's called a religious experience, and that first happened when Kevin, because Pye knew him really well, because I
Yeah,
think because of his sister Jane Hastings was his girlfriend, and so he came round late at a caravan party where we used to have a bungalow called St Elmo outside Canterbury that overlooked the golf course. You know, the golf
yeah.
courses like Pat,
Hmm.
she sat under a tree, golf girl, you know. Anyway, she was about then. And so Kevin came to this party where we all sang this tune, Religious Experience, which has been brought, it's like going, singing a song in the morning, singing it again at night. I don't even know what, I'm doing this tomorrow, okay? When we did it, first of all, when Kevin came round, we sang it
Hmm.
till from 12 till 4 in the morning when people passed out, okay? And
Wow.
then Kevin asked us to go, yeah. I think I was the last person to sort of go, oh, thank God they've all passed out. I can go to sleep myself now, you know. And we went to the studio,
Anyway,
CBS, where it was recorded for one of Kevin's albums. I think it's Joy of a Toy. And it's on there. And Richard Coughlin did the drums. Dave Sinclair, my cousin, did the organ, and I played bass. And that was the original version of it. So that's what I'm doing tomorrow as a tribute
hmm,
album for my friend William Hayter. The other one I've got to sing tomorrow is Clarence in Wonderland. You know,
yeah,
sitting on a beach like
yeah,
Clarence
yeah.
in Wonderland. And I put the bass
Yeah.
part on that too. So that'll be out on Williams thing. You know.
One of the things that most somewhat frustrated me that you in the wildflowers flowers days, you guys had a lot of demos recorded and released it, but you guys never got to unfortunately record the full album. And I
Well,
was
no, but
oh,
it wasn't happening then. This is a band that's starting off, and so when Wildflowers stopped, which was after 4 years, I left after about 3/4 of a year, okay, and then eventually, I mean, Kevin had already gone, and then Robert left, and Richard
okay.
became. It was all overlapping, and then Richard Coughlin became the drummer. But I'd already given my job to Pye Hastings, guitar, okay, so he was the
Mhm,
first one to join it when I left. And he became a singer with Robert too. He had a higher voice than Robert, and so he liked to sing high, so he always got a higher voice, okay. And so he got to know, and then my cousin Richard joined, and then Dave Sinclair, my cousin, joined, and they had another bass player because Hugh had left. I think even Brian had left then, and then Wildflower stopped, and um, uh, already by then Soft Machine had started, and it had gone through different lineups. First of all, with David Allen, and then then it became trio. I mean, even Andy Summers was. I remember Andy Summers being about when Caravan started, because Pye, he never joined Soft Machine. He joined Kevin
mhm.
Ayres later. Okay, you know, from the Police Car. You know, he's only acquaintance, but he's a really good player. He's great. Andy Summers, fantastic. He was about when Caravan started and they had their first home in Whitstable, where that other concert was. You know, the Bear and Key, where Wildflowers played. But we lived in a bit nearer the sea in a place called Westgate Terrace, number 77. It was, and overlooked the sea and all that. We were there for 6 months, but um, during that period, at the end of that period of time, Pye asked me when Wildflowers stopped. would I join them? I'd been at college then 4 years. I was one of the sharp pencil brigade, you know. I can paint and draw and all that and do woodwork stuff because my dad was the #1 antique restorer for the palace, the Archbishop's Palace and all that stuff. He was a woodworker in Canterbury. You know. So I'd already done. So when I went to college, I had to be an industrial designer. You cover all materials, you know, plastic, glass, DLP, and all the rest of it. And there were 2 courses. One was furniture design, where, if anybody knows about Roger Dean, okay, he was 4 years in front of me with my cousin Dave Sinclair, doing furniture design then. He did all the covers, didn't he, for Ossie Bisa and what's the other one he did? Yes, was it something? Yeah, that's so. Yeah, well, that's what happened. That's how well. And then after 4 years, I thought, and I was playing guitar all the time anyway. Then I was a guitarist. Okay. So all the grammar school boys were obviously hearing all the first jazz music, particularly, you know, Robert
And I would like,
and Mike Ratledge and all that stuff, because Mike Ratledge was in Canterbury. His dad, Mike Ratledge's dad, was my headmaster at the Archbishop's School. Okay, so this Canterbury family thing is a bit, you know, it's a bit like Chaucer's Tales actually. when
yeah,
Soft Machine started, very much like, you know. And also with Caravan, you know, once I said yes to Pie, we started to form a band, we started to write our own music. It was really from Pie, who always wanted to make a rock band. You know, he had a lot of jazz influences from his brother, Jimmy Hastings, who was known
yeah.
as the Stone Getz of the BBC Orchestra. He played sax and flute, second to none. You know, stuff.
He was the older one, I think.
Jimmy was older than Pie, yes. He used to play with my dad occasionally. And that's how I got to meet Jimmy for the first time, was at my sister's 21st birthday party in a village hall, Tyler Village Hall, which is just above where we lived, and her 21st birthday party. And so Jimmy, he was invited to play with my dad, and they played the music at mine. And that's when I first got to know Jimmy. When my sister, who was I was 12 years old then. And so my sister was 9 years older than me. That's the first time I had a really good drink, because I drank everybody's drink that they left, you know, like that, when they hadn't drunk it all. So I got really drunk. And so did everybody else. I remember Jimmy going out for a pee, and he'd gone out and disappeared into the mud. And so he came back with sort of 2-tone trousers, you know.
Yeah.
And they played lovely music. My sister sang always. She was a singer in Canterbury and stuff like that. And her husband then, and her boyfriend then, which she eventually married, his name was Douglas Inkpen, okay? And he lived in Littlebourne, where my sister still lived. I mean, unfortunately, her husband was left the planet, but he was known as a musician too. So all around the Sinclair deal was to do with music. And my first band was in the, even though I played at my first school, St Stephen's School, when I moved to the Archbishop's School, I had a friend called Kenneth Wolfe, became more famous than me, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But we made a band when I was 13 and 14. It's called the Pulsators, okay? And we sang Beatles tunes, like, you know, there be birds on a hill, but I never heard them singing, and, you know, played all the chords and things like that. I played guitar. There was another 2 guitarists in the band, and Ken Wolfe. Well, Ken Wolfe eventually became a metropolitan policeman and moved to London. His father was a priest, okay, but he got the job to look after Princess Diana, okay? That was his job, and the princes, and there's quite a few, you know, he used to take them out when Diana wanted to escape and disappear, and he was the minder for them, and they used to go to, you know, parks and things and go on all the rides like the water slides and go and eat burgers and things like that. You know, he was really good at it. But of course, when the marriage finally fell apart with Charles, of course, he wasn't there to work for Diana then, really, which is a shame, really. But there you go. So that's the first thing. And then when I was at college, after being in Wilde Flowers for the thing, Pi asked me, did I want to join, you know, and make a band? I said, oh, yeah, it's a good idea. So I spoke to my father. I said, well, you know, I was going to be a silversmith. I was doing silversmithing at the time in college. And he said to me, do what makes you most happy. So he wasn't, you know, it's an amazing thing to be said, you know, you're not like, you must be at college, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that. No, do what makes you most happy, which I've done the whole of my life, okay? Had the freedom to do that, yeah. So there you go, that's the start of that question. So sorry to give it such a long answer, but that is the true story about how the Canterbury scene started as you know it.
Yeah, yeah.
It started in right from the word go, when it wasn't called Wilde Flowers, okay, and what linked it to once Soft Machine, once Wilde Flowers had become, you know, the members had moved on, like, you know, Robert and Kevin and Mike Ratledge, okay, that became the first recorded Soft Machine. And someone, I think, called L. Clark came down to Canterbury and interviewed them, because the first album is amazing. It's totally unique, okay? It's like, wow,
Yeah.
what is that? And it gets linked to the Canterbury scene in a big way, okay? And then Caravan came along. That was also linked to Canterbury, okay? And so it goes on. But it was all written by people that weren't in the band. It's the media system that made that work. And the first one's called L. Clark. He came down and interviewed Soft Machine in the countryside, and then it was the Canterbury scene from Soft Machine and Caravan. And everybody that cross-referenced that, especially into the Soft Machine, especially the Soft Machine, and especially Caravan, and myself, as I moved out of Caravan and formed a band called Hatfield and The North. I mean, they came from up near Bishop Stortford, the other side of London. And so the joke is, as Robert said, well, he was, because he wasn't born in Canterbury, when he did start it, right there, Robert's known to be a Canterbury. So his thing was, well, it's only a snotty little town, and in fact, you know, Canterbury is very lolly. Okay, so it's funny what he said about all these other friends that were jazz musicians and things that came from London. He said, well, they're only a bunch of tourists, okay, Canterbury tourists, which I find absolutely hilarious. I mean, no one wanted to be in the Canterbury scene, those people. They related to London and other homes, you know. Like Henry Cowell, which also gets included into the Canterbury scene, is from Cambridge, okay.
Yeah, no,
but they've all got this.
Distant.
It's all got this mixture of psychedelia and jazz and funny whimsical lyrics, you know, from Robert and Pip and myself and Pi, and so that's a whole collection of what the Canterbury scene is, and it's spread out through the world where other people have followed the Canterbury scene, you know, in Holland and France and things like that.
It crossed the boundaries. It's crossed the boundaries all over the years. You know, there's a plenty of artists
nice because
who never
really what the
gone
Canterbury
to
I mean, what the Canterbury scene is. Listen to me, Kel. What the Canterbury scene is family, okay, boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah,
And that's why it's so funny, because it's very much like Chaucer's Tales of Canterbury. You know, with everybody climbing into each other's girlfriends' beds and so having babies, lots of babies and things, and so, you know, it's really funny. The Canterbury scene, you know. Pip wrote some lyrics for my. It's on this one, RSVP, and it's
Yeah.
called What's Rattling, which really means what's rattling Mike Doodledge, because he was always getting asked, oh, what is, especially from China or Japan, oh, particularly Japan, oh, what is doing Mike Rattledge? And so that's the lyric. By the coast, I was kidnapped, for 6 weeks, and that's why I live here, because I see sort of Trulies and things like this. And I always wanted to come back, and so this in '92, these lyrics were written by Pip, coming across from Calais, because he lived in
Uh-huh.
France then. Okay, coming across the English Channel to Dover, a little bit drunk. And I said, well, he's coming across to play this album, to play drums on this album, okay? And he's a really good lyricist, okay? I said, can you write some lyrics for it? And so he said, oh, yeah. And he did them, I think, in about 30 minutes on the boat when he was really drunk, okay? And it goes like this. It goes, I don't want this to be one more new nostalgic tale, like Canterbury, like Chaucer's Tales of Canterbury, written in Braille. I've had enough of that, and I'm bored with cups of tea and riffs in 15/8. A la Hatfield and The North, clever rhythmic signatures, tricky dicky chords, rehearsing for a week,
Wonderful.
sympathy middle eight. And then it goes on, and there's all these things like I was about. Who did it as a joke to me? Like, I'm bored with Caravan, Fleetwood Mac and Uncle Sam. I'm tired of Tangerine Dream, Hatfield and Soft Machine. He really went for it. Right? So I have to
Yeah.
sing this. I'm changing the lyrics to, I do want this to be one more new nostalgic tale, like Chaucer's Tales of Canterbury, written for sale. Okay. So,
Yeah.
no, it's very
I would
much.
like to ask, just to wrap up this early part of your career before we finally starting to talk about Caravan days. You had said about Mike Ratledge, and for me, he passed away last year,
Yeah,
2025,
sadly so. Yeah.
fortunately.
Yeah,
And
he was
for
82.
me,
He was getting round the clock though. He'd had quite a good innings,
he during this whole soft machine days and during the whole career he had built as a solo artist, as a collaborator, he really market a sort of a bold image. He has
Yeah.
that keyboard playing, and he wore always sunglasses. I never seen his eyes. He was a very specific, a sort of gloomy figure. How was
Well, he was
what
very
memories do you
particular.
have of him,
I
getting to
first
know
knew.
him?
I mean, I never met. I only knew his dad. Okay, as my headmaster,
Oh yeah.
and he was quite a sterling figure. Very, he ran the whole Archbishop School and all that. He didn't mess. You know. Um, Yeah, he was very authoritarian and all that sort of stuff. Very strong, particular, only way to be. And Mike was very similar. But I first saw him play his organ in the garden at a place called Watmer Hall, where Pye's sister Jane Hastings had put the because she was Kevin was her boyfriend. She paid for a place for them all to start and be together to play music, the three of them. I remember going there with Pye, because Pye stayed there as well. It's just outside Canterbury, called Watmer Hall, this place. It's quite a nice place. It's like one building called Watmer Hall. It's Hall of Watmer. And in Storey. And I remember them playing on the garden, and this amazing organ sound, because he used to he was then experimenting with fuzz boxes and things, and his organ was a Lowry, so it had a semitone pedal on it that you go.
Yeah.
He had this particular noise, which I think is very similar to the way Dave Stewart makes his noise. Okay, it's very sort of like on the case, and particularly very studied musically as far as reading music and things like that. And it's very interesting that at the beginnings and the days. And you're talking about Mike Relish. I was much younger than him, and so it was, I never really played with him ever. And I saw him a bit when Hugh was then in Soft Machine after Kevin, But yeah, I mean, my favourite is the first album, the Soft Machine's first album, because that was totally unique then. And then it moved slowly towards jazz, and I really enjoyed the second album and the third album. And then it started to wander into written music in a big way, and still liked it very much, but not so much as the early days when it was a bit more free flow. I mean, the first one was Kevin Ayres playing bass. I really liked his bass playing. Really good on that first album, and there was a couple of weird bits, but the songs were good. Robert singing, amazing. It actually delivered what Soft Machine for me was all about. Robert's freedom and experimentation, unique drumming. Didn't know anybody else that drummed like that. He was very. He was a listener to all the jazz drummers in a big way, and eventually it was such a shame. He'd made a band called Matching Mole, of course, that Phil Miller was in, and also my cousin Dave Sinclair, and another keyboard player called Dave McRae.
Yeah.
And Bill McCormack on bass. That was a very nice subject. Those albums are good. They're worth a listen to if you're interested in that style of thing. And then, unfortunately, he got a bit too drunk, and at a party he came out a window, escaping the party, and climbed down the drain pipe. And of course, it ran out. His 4 stories up, it ran out, and he was too drunk to hold onto the drain pipe, and he crashed down onto the pavement below. Broke his ankles and his back, low down, which he couldn't, paralysed his legs, broke his spinal cord, so he couldn't feel its drums for the rest of his life. But he made a good job. He did lots of really good music and things, and always singing though, always singing album, and the way he did all his music was always very interesting. I thought it, And then, of course, Kevin left and made his own songs and things like that. A couple I'm going to sing tomorrow. The tribute album, But what I'm talking about Mike Relish, didn't really talk to him. He didn't need to know about, the deal. He was very much his own person. You hear it in. He's obviously a very close friend to Hugh. They used to discuss stuff and stuff like that. And of course, they wanted to go make the music in a jazz direction, which meant that Robert eventually had to leave the band and let them get on with it. And the first drummer there that took his place was Phil Howard. And I remember taking him down with Dave McRae, and I did some concerts with Noel Coxall at Reims Festival, which is another story. So everything was always linked together in the Canterbury scene.
Okay. I would like to ask about Caravan now, and about the debut album from 1968, entering into the band properly and starting to dwell into the albums, to the history of some of the tracks and whatever. And regarding the debut album, established something that I always found quite fascinating about you guys as a band. You guys used to record quite quickly. I think maybe except for If I Could Do, because there was a problem during the recording sections, and we're gonna dwell more into that. And I would like to ask you, was it common for you guys for doing the parts or the whole things to done in 2 or 1 or 2 takes? I'm somewhat positively shocked listening to this debut album, because it's certain it features a certain, as I would say, naive feeling, but at the same time
Well,
it
come on, we
shows
were
the band
yeah,
full
okay.
competence.
Let me answer it. That the whole deal about Caravan. You know now how it started because Pi Hastings wanted to make a band with Richard Coughlin
Yeah.
and Dave Sinclair in it, and they asked me to join it, which I did. And so we were already friends then anyway before we started to play together. I've been playing. Pi stayed in my home when he first came down to Canterbury before I left Wilde Flowers. That's why he got the job, because he needed to make money and he came to stay in my parents' home for 6 weeks. And so we used to play, he was learning to play guitar then, and so we used to play guitar together, things like that. And he needed to get a job, so then he went and was hop picking. It's very famous in southeast Kent, we're outside Canterbury, the hops for the beer and things, And so we got a couple of tents. I went there in my summer holiday, during when I was at college, because they were doing they eventually did Wildflowers then, and so we got too used to each other playing things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, Pi was trying to, because of Kevin Ayres, I think, and his brother, he wanted to write music. And so when Caravan started off, he was the writer of the music, okay? But we all put our own things in. And so what we did is we worked on what is called, to get the money up, to get someone to live so we could rehearse and do it. We went and worked on together, Dave Sinclair, Pi Hastings and I, on a motorway. Drove up from Canterbury to Sevenoaks, which is quite a famous sort of bypass motorway there. And we worked there for 6 weeks. I think it was only 6 weeks. I think Dave Sinclair stayed on a bit longer. And we earned enough money to rent a place in Whitstable where, that overlooked the sea. It was in a terrace, Westgate Terrace. Dave had the biggest room where we used to play music. He had the Hammond organ then. And I kitted it all out with soundproofing, 2 mattresses in the window, because we rehearsed loudly, and we just played music, We wrote. I wrote a couple of songs, and Pi started a couple of songs, and we all worked into it together, I think it was very influenced by Having to Smoke, okay, by lyrics by me and Pi that related to the psychedelic effect of smoking hashish, for 6 months, which not too many people know about. And lyrics like mine, I can see you creeping, Mr. Policeman, looking through the keyhole in my door, taking notes of all that floats with the beat, your marching feet, shiny shoes, looking for clues, and all that stuff, okay? My girlfriend eventually became Pat Gibson. Her father was Assistant Chief Constable of Kent, okay? And used to get warnings when we got going. Well, anyway, the actual story goes for 6 months. We had a friend called Bede Reeves, okay, who lived in Blean, just outside Canterbury, and used to go down to Morocco and collect hashish, and we were into hash smoking then, and he nearly got busted. He was in London then, and he had a squat next door to him that had a hole in where he had all of his hashish, okay? I mean, the reason why I'm telling you this is because we had a nice time smoking and playing music as young boys without any influence from anywhere else, which was very much to do with the psychedelic scene of Soft Machine and Pink Floyd and all the rest of it, okay? It was all about, love and peace, joss sticks and hippies.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
psychedelic music looked like that, okay? And it brought people together in a big way where all they did was play music together every day, every hour of the day, okay? And So we, underneath our floorboards in the front thing, there was a whole mass of, you know, pollinated hashish from Morocco, you know, and Nepalese temple bowls, which are slightly, it's got veins of opium in it, things like that, you know. And so we smoked every day, yeah. And, you know, it was hidden under our floorboards, we had to be a bit careful. And we worked out all the music then, every day we played, 24 hours a day. There wasn't any ego problem about it. You were boys together,
That's
you're just making each other sound good. And so we only did 8 concerts during that period of time, just round
wow.
Canterbury, only 8. And Jane's influence,
Yes, so Phil, it was
Jane's,
deliberate.
yes, because we
Only
already
8.
played. I mean, it was all about, I mean, Dave's sound was there then, wasn't it? The Hammond organ.
Okay.
I should have been a guitarist, but, you know, it started off the Caravan thing before Dave got his big Hammond organ. He was playing a Vox Continental, okay, but during the first few days before I think we even moved into Westgate Terrace, he had the Hammond organ. He was playing bass then, right? He played bass as well. He wanted to be a bassist, bass player. So the first bass I was using was his Vox Cougar bass. And, you know, and so I can manage that because my father was a bass player too. And I hear the instrument, the guitar and the bass is the same instrument. It's the same instrument. It's just an octave lower, okay? And so that worked out well. I became a bass player overnight, you know, no problem at all. And we just got on with it and had some really good fun. We had a couple of girlfriends that used to bring us food and things like that, you know. Soft Machine went away to play on the Hendrix tour, so we had all their Soft Machine equipment, Marshall amps and Marshall speaker cabinets, you know, like Jimi Hendrix had and all that stuff. They went off to do the USA tour with Hugh Hopper as a roadie. Kevin Ayers did the first concerts with Soft Machine.
Wow.
Okay, and so he gave me his precision bass to use, which was an upgrade from playing a Vox Cougar. So I had all those 6 months playing this bass, okay? In fact, it was only about 4 months and then they came back. But and also we had all the Soft Machine Marshall gear. So we were there ready to sort of like go for it. And Pi was always trying to find a record company that, because we had a whole set of music straight away, you know, I mean, they've been playing together for some time, Richard Coughlin and Dave Sinclair and Pi and the Wilde Flowers, so they'd already made it. They just wanted someone to join that. And I was obviously first choice because I was Dave's cousin and could play guitar very well and all that. And that's what it happened. And so it was very quick for us. And we had 8 really good concerts where lots of people enjoyed what we did and all the rest of it. And Pi obviously Pi was knowing his sister then and all that sort of stuff. But she was a very important model in London, and so she met up with this guy called Miles, who was the editor of the International Times magazine in London. And we got sort of like, Pi went round from their directions to find these record companies like Witch Season and all the rest of it, and then we were introduced to someone that was to do with Verve label on MGM, and so they heard us and they wanted us to play for them, and we did our first album for Verve label MGM, okay. And the sleeve notes, if you look on the back of the Caravan album, which is right here, okay, I can tell you, I can read them to you, in fact. This is by Miles, okay? It's by Miles, so. And the sleeve notes are, one evening H came over, I'm not sure who H was, and we sat down and played him the Beatles album in mono, only because the stereo hadn't been pressed yet.
Yeah.
And that one it goes,
Classic thing.
which Tony sent. I mean, Tony Cox mixed it, so their names are on there, you know. And it's true that they worked in the airplane direction of Overall Sound, John Coltrane's Sheets of Sound, WD, the band was called Caravan. I mean, it's quite interesting. You see the sleep notes. So it tells you all straight away. This is after 8 concerts we did this. And then the studio, it was wonderful because, okay, it was rather strangely made because production by Tony Cox, I think that was his first job, and he sort of stretched out the stereo a bit weird, I think this is a mono one, or maybe it's an alpha, I'm not sure. But there it is. It's for sale to the highest bidder because I need some money for Nick Sinclair, who's restored the Hammond organ, right? His dad's living in Japan at the moment and moved there after we'd gone up there to do a Land of Grey and Pink tour in 2003, And yeah, it was nice. He loved Japan and always wanted to go and live there since he came with Camel to Japan in 1979, So there's a story about the first album, if you like. And then it moved, and then the next one, you said there was a problem. Well, that was first recorded at Tangerine Dream, and the engineer was great. What's his name? Oh, God. He's a good bass player, too, and he's a really good sound engineer. I mean, these production things okay, but I think it's always the engineer that does the job, Like with Land of Grey and Pink, was a guy called David Grinstead, and he was super. I mean, obviously, David Hitchcock, who is a real good close friend of Pye, and he obviously oversaw the production of it and things like that. But there's a huge amount of editing on that, on the Land of Grey and Pink. But that's the third one, okay. I really enjoy all first 3 albums, and also Waterloo Lily. I enjoyed them very much indeed, and I think the Land of Grey and Pink, which of course is most known, because Golf Girl became the most famous bit of music on there, didn't it? And Land of Grey and Pink, the actual title track, was mine, and Winter Wine, they're the most known, and also of course the B-side, which is my cousin Dave Sinclair's 9 Foot Underground, was particularly, written all the way through by him, or thought, or imagined by him, conceived by him, with us, and Pye particularly to do with rhythms and things like that. Dave always had a very particular way he wanted it played, ba 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 ba. It was really like that, And I got to sing a bit more than that, which I think I should have sung a bit more on the first album and the second album. Pye's voice always sounded much better when we were in harmony together. He's got a lovely voice. It's very particular Pye, but it's not really a total all-in-control vocal, you know what I mean? When he first went round to sometimes a little bit out of tune, his timing is amazing. And his timing, particularly with Richard, he was always making sure Richard was going to be there. And his ability to play fills before the beat and then land as like, now it lands. It was amazing. It was totally unique, Richard's drumming. And so the whole combination, we were, separate characters that actually made the thing work. It's like there was always discussions about what it should be, the sound of it, how long it was, how the introductions worked. Dave was very good on all the soloing stuff, Pye eventually became more into doing solos on guitar. He really, he was more a chord player and very good punctuation with Richard. Like my songs. My dad said to me, I said this earlier to you, he said, Richard, just before that album, okay, Land of Grey and Pink, he said to me, Richard, if you want to be successful, do nursery rhymes for adults. And of course, that's what we were all doing anyway, all the way through this pop market thing. Everybody, if you recognise the singing and things, even the parts of Dave Dave Sinclair's music, you know, there's a place where I can go. That
Place
became
to
sort
my
of
own.
iconic.
A Place to My Own from this album is
The first
absolutely a
one,
standout for me.
yeah, Pies. That's Pies.
And I
Right.
have I had an impression, and you set me straight if I'm wrong, that these songs, these earliest songs from the Caravan's catalog, were quite autobiographical. You know, y- uh, uh, in a sort of way. It used to 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 be
It's
that
fresh. It's fresh. It doesn't
that
have
thing.
any. It's fresh. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, particularly Pie on this first album. That's where the style of the writing starts to come from, because and of course he's got the style of us playing, particularly Dave Sinclair and I, harmonically elaborate. Okay, the bass playing
Yeah.
isn't really, but I'm not a bass player. I play what I sing and hear, and so when I'm playing with Dave Sinclair, pushing him further. You can hear me doing it. Okay,
Yeah.
pushing, making him take the boat out further, and also we're in pretty good harmony together. You know, I mean, Dave always wanted it to be more ba 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 bee bee ba 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 ba. You know, but I'm melodic. I'm more like a double bass, like a jazz double bass player.
Mhm.
You know, I get that from my dad. And but no, that I say to everybody, if you want to be unique, you've got to sing what you're singing it inside yourself anyway. Lots of musicians say, "Oh no, I don't sing." Yes, they are. They're singing that inside themselves, but it's coming out only as sound through their finger. I say to everybody, you know, it's like saying to you, well, if you want to learn anybody's music, I mean, do it straight away. Now, this is it's in all music that you hear and you study to listen. If you're going to be a musician, you have to be able to do that inside yourself. And the only way I can tell if you're doing it in tune is sing this note, same note. And that's how you start to learn to sing, okay? Pythagoras' conception. That's in everything you listen to, on radio, on TV, on your phone. You relate to the music and hear it and are able to sing along with it inside yourself, okay? And the way to make it so you can sing that note, da, is to sing it. And so that's how you start to learn to sing and play songs. And it's very easy because Pythagoras' conception is just magnificent, isn't it? To think of it that way. But the best way to do it is by sound and be a parrot
Mhm.
and follow it, you know.
Let's stick to some other topic. You know, inside this thing of
This is music.
musical of
We're talking about music, and so that's what we're talking about. Okay, Pythagoras'
yeah.
theory, conception. Yeah,
And
my
I would like
cousin.
to ask about, and I would like to ask about this first record before we enter into if I could do. And I would like to ask about the medleys, the poo-poo-hees that you guys used to do on the albums.
The what? The
They
poo
were
poo what?
marvelous, you know. And and I would like to ask, and I would like
Pomeranian.
to ask about these pieces. These ones usually come from jams, or they were mostly pre-written melodies that you guys used to arrange into long form tracks. I believe in this case that those kind of tracks for Richard Can't Be Long Now, medleys, these things used to sort of push the band, push you
Well,
and the other
they
guys.
come from yeah. Let me tell you. Because you've asked the question now. All those songs come from imagination of songs inside yourself. Okay, you're
Mhm,
talking about for Richard. That comes from a riff which I started like bum 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 bum,
mhm,
um, and it was really for something for Dave Sinclair to play over solos. And he said, well, look, and he pushed it into a song. he puts it into a melody. Da da da, boom 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 da ba 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 ba. Okay, that comes from Dave, and so he wrote this song over my riff and extended it. Ba 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 boom ba boom boom ba boom boom. By choosing some more, like, notes and things. I probably suggested those, but he wrote this, he composed this, and so we all got into it, and it carried on like a long piece of, riff music. It had a song and things like that, and that's how these things came about. I mean, this is on the second album, isn't it? And
Mhm.
because it's this harmonic sort of deal with a riff and things like that, it's easy to hear for people to enjoy. It's not too complex. It becomes a whole instrumental deal. I'm not sure how it starts off. Didn't Pi do a vocal start to that? Or does it just come down, 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 down? I can't remember now. Wow. I mean, the band carried on playing it once I'd left. And especially now, if it is a band. At the moment, Caravan are only a trio, and they're on a boat going down the Rhine, I think in July, as like a folk band, more acoustic. Because it's quite hard to keep finding enough work to have everybody in the band, That's Caravan at the moment. It's Pi's birthday. Today, I think. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was Dave Stewart's, I think, last week or sometime.
And I would like to ask now about if I could do it all over, I would do it over you. And there was a sort of gap between the first and the second album due some issues. The band tried to self-produce, and it was a disaster. And some
Oh,
songs
sorry,
had to be redone. Oh yeah, from what I heard, what I read, and what I heard from Pi and other interviewers, this album has a tough period for the band because the band tried to self-produce it in the first place, and it was some songs were not completed by the early days of the recording when the bands were
I
trying
mean,
to
that's
self-produce
the way.
it.
I mean, usually what I'm a culprit there. It's good. All my music I tend to get right in the studio, and it doesn't mean say you're playing it wrong, but then you decide to do stuff and things like that. I mean, yes, because Pi came up with quite some ideas. He came up with a 7/4 riff, boom, 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 boom. All compound, all odd timings are all in one anyway. They just go across the beat in different ways, like 1 2
Yeah.
3 4 5 1 2 3 4, and all these things. In the first album, you've got boom, 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 boom. That's 3 2/3. Okay, comes from. I mean, he listened to a lot of jazz music, Pi, and what's it called? Bum, 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 bum. Way back for Caravan with that. Okay, so Pi came up with extended things. Mine was on the first album. Mine was very Mr. Policeman and Grandma's Lawn.
Mhm.
Dun 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 dun. Etc. Strange lyrics, diddly dee, biddly dee. There's a combination between us all. Now on the second one, even on the first one, we were like adjusted it and did it and blah blah. But I don't know why Pi called it a disaster, because that's good music comes from mistakes. That's how you find those extra harmonies and odd bits and pieces, because it all works. It just depends how you use the deal of it to make it like the same vibe as a complete piece of music, rather than it all going off on a tangent and disappearing off into the distance, a bit odd. And we used to, suddenly the music started to get a little bit more elaborate on the second one, okay? And so, and I think probably Pye's interview about it was, well, it didn't go quite the way that it should have done because it, you know, the writing wasn't conformed to, you know, we all had our own different ways of, you know, because there wasn't a leader in the band really, but Pye was really, but it's like there wasn't a leader as far as the music went because it came together what everybody felt was the best, you know, and then you adjusted it to sort of cope with all the other wants and things like that, you know. So I don't know, I've never heard that, you know. It's probably because he's very close in order with Dave Hitchcock. Did Dave Hitchcock oversee that second one? I think he did, didn't he? Because we changed to Decca DRAM then, and that's where Dave
Yeah.
Hitchcock was working. Okay, so that's why it was, you know, and so you know, and Pye was working very closely with Dave Hitchcock. And I don't know about that. I mean, I can't ever remember him being in the studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's part of why we did it again. And it was no problem. I used to really enjoy playing things many different ways, which I still do. Because once it's fixed in time, if you play it differently, everybody in the media go, oh, it sounds like a mistake. That wasn't the same as that, and da da da. I mean, music for me, if it's progressive, and with Hatfield and The North, we never played the same way, the same set. Ever.
Yeah.
Never, ever. And that's why I moved away from Caravan, because I got fed up with bar chords and things like that, where people, it's fixed in time, the same every night. It's the same with Camel, the same music, the same announcements, you know. I mean, I really enjoyed it, especially when Pete was in the band, because it was really, the combination between Andy Latimer and Pete was amazing. They're both really good music songwriters and imagination, and it used to come together at a distance, but when they were working on it and things like that, you know, Andy Latimer was very strong. Of course, he wanted to make it be the way he went, and Pete was the same, you know. I mean, I think, you know, I managed it. Anyway, we're talking about Camel. Sorry about that. I moved on from the second album. I see it all the time. In everybody's lives, they only imagine one long piece of music. It comes out as separate songs as you ride the ladder or up or downward to what your imagination creates. You know, it's like they all relate together, and they all.
You had said about how was important by Hastings' leadership within the band during this period and this sort of
Well, he's always been.
internal figure.
For me, he's always the leader of the band because it was his initial start to make a band before it was even called Caravan. Okay. Pye chose the name from the piece of music, which is very famous, Caravan. Okay. And it wasn't the Caravan, it was just Caravan, which is a very nice name. And it got a very nice sleeve notes, you know. This is us
And
outside of Graveney.
you were talking about in the Land of Grey and Pink, and that album was a really sort of advancement for the Caravan as a band in some terms. And Pye
Yeah, okay.
had
When you say
experience,
yeah.
and Pye had experience during this period a sort of writer's block, which helped,
Well,
I think.
no, it wasn't a block. It was he'd really done it all before, and a lot of the ideas, first of all, came from Pye, which we all worked on and put together, and he'd made some
Okay.
arrangements. Sometimes they were slightly altered. We all worked together all the time, and so he gave Dave and I a chance to do music. And of course, I had
Okay.
songs rather than great long pieces of instrumental music, which Dave was heading for all his deal, you know. Now he's just doing songs and bits and pieces. It's a shame he didn't go back to do the Caravan original thing from Land Grey Paint and wrote another one like that, you know. I think he tried it. But when once the band split up, of course, it lost that unique deal. And Pye's Pie went a bit more sort of like popular middle of the road stuff, you know, even though his songs are still totally unique. It got this sort of, you know, I mean, I love all his music. It's lovely. Once we're both out the band, you know, for Girls Who Grow Plump in the Night, unfortunate title, but I mean, I didn't like his titles much, you know. Like titles like Cunning Stunt. I think it's not even funny, you know, just rude and slightly unromantic. Not very sexy, you know. I like the music to be romantic, and the titles particularly. Land of Grey and Pink's a nice title, and when we came back together and made an album again, I wanted to call it Back to Front, meaning back to the, you know, back to the front.
Wow.
But I said, oh, no, come on. I wrote a
Terrible title. Let's be honest. It's a terrible title.
Well, I mean, it's not a terrible title, but it's like, you know, it doesn't really swing along with the deal of that we're all,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
where we are,
Yeah.
Canterbury, you know, Caravan, sea, Canterbury, sea, you know, Camel, sea, everything's in sea. This is what my, you know, really it's what my partner in life then was Heather Kinnear. And she worked very hard. All these bands, I got them to reform and by, you know, like the TV show for Caravan, it reformed in our house, in our flat. And really, and Heather did this huge amount of work, you know, to bring the Canterbury scene up, because it was a joke to everybody else, you know. And say, well, no, Canterbury is a particular sound. You make it. Why not take part with it? It's where the bigger audience is. It's where the money means you can do it again, okay? And so, and that's what's happening now, you know.
Back to In the Land of Grey and Pink, to special things in the repertoire of the album. And one of the things that most struck me when I listened to this album when I was, I don't know, I think it was 14. And one of the things that most struck me when I heard this album for the first time when I was 14 or 15 years old, that how is a strong and special repertoire. You know, you have Golf Girl, you have Winter Wine, you have 9 Feet Underground, and I would like to ask about and I would like to know very quickly, you know, and I would like to ask some parts of the songwriting process of some of these tracks and trivia things about these tracks. And Golf Girl specifically was about your first wife. Did you change the lyrics from the original idea? And how was the process of creating this track altogether? Do you remember the exact moment that inspired the tune, the lyrics in special?
Well, yeah, it always comes from a melody first of all. Look, listen. When you're writing music and things like that, you say, "Well, what goes to da da da?" This is it. When you that melody and stuff like that. I mean, I thought this. I think that's my song, right? Okay, all the way through, it's my song, my arrangement. My thinking of and also Winter Wine is, and also Golf Girl is, okay. And we're talking about Golf Girl, aren't we? Land of Grey and Pink, I meant as well. So we're talking about Golf Girl, okay. That's the most known and wanted thing, and it's really unfortunate that it didn't come out as a single, whereas Loves to Love You did, and that was Dave Hitchcock's idea. Of course, it wasn't a single music, and it was the wrong voice to be popular, right? It didn't make anything. If it had been Golf Girl, I think it might have even kept David in the band, okay, because I think it would have sold more. Now it's used even to keep Pie going, and they always do Golf Girl and Land of Grey and Pink. They always do it, okay, because it's the most popular bits of music that the Caravan played. And I'm not being egotistical here, but they are melodies and things like that. And the words come after the melody. I'd already got but I'd already got these 3 chords which were a tone apart. You know, I can do it by playing the chords for, if you like. But it's like it starts in D, major. It's a bar chord in D, and then it was a bar chord in C, and it's a bar chord in B flat. You know, so it's jing a ding 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 ding, jiggity ding 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 ding, jiggity ba 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 da ba ba da ba ba. You know, that played on trombone. Okay. And there was one particular trombone player in England that we couldn't get. We've got another one that sounded great. And so, and then the words, first of all, I made them up in the studio. And Pi made the joke of calling it Group Girl, okay? And I won't tell you about that, okay? So, you know what a group is, don't you? He called it Group Girl, when in fact eventually I got, and it was about my family. It was about Jason, my son, and it was about Pat, my partner in life. We never got married. She was my partner. So eventually she became Richard Sinclair. Okay. And yes, it was about my family, and it's about where we were in Stobmarsh Road in St Elmo, our little bungalow. Where we were after 6 months of being in Whitstable, we were in a bungalow that overlooked the golf course, and that's where the words come from. Standing on a golf course, dressed in PVC, I chanced upon a golf girl selling cups of tea. Okay, well, the golf girl was Pat, my girlfriend then. Okay. And we'd had a son called Jason. So the first lyrics in the studio, which I was having to write, I always write the lyrics in the studio, you know, when I haven't written them, and that's why it took such a long time to record the third album. You know. Everybody was rearranging their music. I knew how my songs went then, and I already taught them to them. Some of them didn't have lyrics. Winter Wine lyrics came quite easily, you know. Winter wine, are you always flowing, blowing in my mind like a stream? Your magic waters move me to a dream. I'm travelling with you, drifting carefree, dropping downward through fresh glasses, bubbles merrily as it passes, never knowing where you're going, carrying me with you. You know, so the lyrics are a song, a sort of fantasy story. Okay, so a Land of Grey and Pink fantasy story. Golf Girl, a little bit more realistic because, you know, Canterbury Golf Course is quite an important place, and so it's next to Canterbury. It's where Kevin Ayres was born. It's Herne Bay Front. You know, it tells the story of Herne Bay Front, which is quite important. It's where my dad used to play in the Herne Bay Pavilion, and my granddad. Okay, they're talking about the Land of Grey and Pink. Yeah, that's how they. I first of all
I love.
wrote my songs come from, and you're talking about the songs. Pies too. He tends to write the lyrics at the same time as he wrote the songs. Okay, I tended to have to keep sort of trying to make this story work, and it's all done through rhyme. You know, they're called nursery rhymes for adults. Okay, like all songs.
Winter Wine is another one from my favorites.
Yeah,
Could you share
it
some
was mine
trivia
too.
or
I know, but
songwriting process from them?
yes, it's because it works both ways. It suggests this melodic deal, which I've got a voice like my dad. Okay, I get told I'm not being egotistical, no, but it does. People contact me because they like the sound of it. They like the type of music. They like the type of harmonics that go with it, especially when you've got Dave Sinclair Pye and Richard doing the music. We were quite harmonically together, you know. Nice timings, nice, and those arrangements work really well. You know, two verses. You know, we're talking about Golf Girl now. Two verses, chorus, two verses. That's it. But you know, quite simple structure with a nice intro and with an exit that sort of goes. You know, it's like
Okay.
complete, isn't it? And it's nice and easy to listen to. It's nice and simple. It's fun to sing along to. I always hope that people are going to sing it along because they do if you tell them to, you know. And Winter Wine's
9 feet.
interesting because it's got more chords. It moves about a bit, changes key, goes from D to G, and yeah, and it's got a few nice rhythm things. It's got great solos, obviously from Dave. Great harmonic delivery of solo, and you know.
And I would like, do you consider 9 Feet Underground a really giant step further for the band in terms of songwriting? Because it's the first great suite of the group, you know, and it's quite, it
Yeah,
sounds
no, it is.
really
I
quite
think
particular.
it's known as that. That many people love that, especially the musicians. But more musicians like that than they do the people that like short songs and things, or singles and stuff. Oh, yeah, that is great. Yeah, the opus. Yeah, the thing. Yeah, Dave Sinclair did a good job. Yeah, thousands of people like that.
Dave was extraordinary on that one, you know.
Yeah, I think he was good on all of them. I particularly like him on the very first one that you like, Land, Place of My Own, and Richard too, with his the beginning, you know, the roll in and the deal, and yeah, Dave's a really good songwriter. It's a shame he doesn't go back to this type of opus thing where it's a whole series of tunes, because in that there's a couple of really nice songs too. A great melody to start it, you know, ba 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 dee ba do da dee da. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be rock music, does it? It's up to you what you want to make of it. And so he was very much into rhythm then, you know, making something stronger than. And Pie, very good at rhythms, you know, like Golf Girl is boom, cat, boom, boom, a cat, boom, cat. I like it a bit more. Now we can play it any way I like, you know. I put much more chordal into it, much more chordal approach, and don't do the simple stuff. I mean, it's all
My
simple music.
yeah. My question now is about legacy, you know. In the Land of Grey and Pink is a sort of that album which crosses the boundaries of time, you know, and it's still an album that older people and younger people still loves it until this present
Yeah,
day.
you have
And I
to.
would like to ask,
Hmm.
and I would like to ask you, uh, to what do you attribute this evergreen flavor of this album, this legacy, this enduring legacy of that record?
I think it comes from the harmonic approach. Okay, but I mean, you can say that about many records and things. I mean, which are the ones of the Stones you like? It depends how many thousands or millions of people. I mean, check out Paul McCartney. I mean, how many million people listen
Hmm.
to his
Yeah.
songs? They're songs, aren't they? They're melodies that you recognise. And so, why do they last a long time? Because they're beautiful melodies that you can hear, and it takes you on the story with the melody, particularly with the lyrics and things. Okay, also with the rhythmic patterns and things. And it doesn't matter what style of music it is. It could be Led Zeppelin, it could be Frank Sinatra, it could be Jimi Hendrix, it could be you name it. You know, Led Zeppelin was for me not only, but I was only interested in it because when I moved to London, in the front room where I was living was what Pip's friend, you know, Phil and Pip had friends together with Benj Lefebvre, and his job was to be first of all road manager and sound engineer for Soft Machine, and then he did Jeff Beck, okay, minder and soft, you know, and sound engineer, and then he became Robert Plant's minder and sound. He was the sound engineer for Led Zeppelin, okay, and so he was living with us. And I remember being taken down to Fulham Palace Road to the theatre there, and Robert, the Led Zeppelin came off the road. I mean, it's all. That was talking about influences and why it becomes and things. It's to do with the actual spirit of the band being very together on on popular. They make the it becomes popular because many people enjoy it.
Mhm.
Okay, it's usually because of its simplicity and but its actual delivery of the individual bands that have their own character, very strong characters. I mean, a good example of that is Genesis, you know, or Police with Sting with music and the musicians and their identity and Led Zeppelin. They become the most popular rock band for 10 years, at the time. Beatles managed quite a few years, didn't they, till they started to move in their separate directions. But, they became individuals which are still, the same thing. So you're asking a question, this is why I think it is, isn't it? Why do I think it became a legacy? It's like all music. It's played with this sort of like good spirit, karmic energy, whether it's loud rock or whether it's folk music or whatever. People en masse give it that. That's why it becomes like they could see popular listening to sort of like, you call it time travels. And you travel back in time to hear it too. I'm time traveling all the time, literally physically, because after your talk, I'll be talking to someone in Russia or Japan or something. It's like I'm usually up 30 hours of the day, and people say, "Well, don't you sleep?" Well, for me, this is such a pleasure to do, especially when it's like Robert's
We
lyrics,
were.
and I like to talk about me. I got some drum sits down there.